Colin Chapman's much paraphrased for speed and lightness gets wheeled out whenever we're talking about a new Lotus, but it could be more relevant than ever with this much upgraded Elise. Light is right is the new catchphrase, and Lotus has stripped out 10 kilos from the standard car and as much as 41 kilos from this, the Sprint. That comes all over the car, from the bodywork to the wheels, the brakes, the seats, even the gear linkage is lighter than before. And it all adds up to what I would hope would be a super focused and back to basics Elise, the like of which we have always enjoyed. Where better to put that to the test than Lotus's test track here at Hethel. Enough talking, let's get to it. So I'm going to try and keep the number crunching to a minimum, but basically you have your Elise Sport and your Elise Sport 220. Both of these can be specified as Sprint versions for another £5,000, and that gets you the full 41 kilo weight saving. But if you look at the standard Elise Sport, that has a 1.6 naturally aspirated engine with 134 horsepower and 114 pound-feet of torque. Not a lot in the grand scheme of things, has to be said. If you go to the 220, you get the 1.8 supercharged engine, and that has 217 horsepower and 187 pound-feet of torque. Now these are pretty modest numbers, but the most important number on this new Elise is the weight figure. Now in this car that I'm driving, which is the naturally aspirated 1.6, so arguably the purest spec, I think we could say, the dry curb weight is 798 kilos. Now, what's the relevance of a dry curb weight when it doesn't count the fuel or the driver? Well, Alfa Romeo with the 4C, they use a dry weight as well, and that car is pretty much 100 kilos heavier, like for like, which is pretty astounding really. Now obviously the Alfa Romeo's got 240 horsepower, so really you should be comparing it with the Sport 220. But either way, the Lotus, which is made of aluminium, remember, not carbon fibre like the Alfa Romeo, is still significantly lighter. Although we say we want lightweight, naturally aspirated cars, when it comes down to it, is an Elise with just 134 horsepower really enough in this day and age? Well, I've driven the 220, and that's definitely a stronger car, but there's something really nice about this naturally aspirated engine. Okay, it's looking a bit further back into Elise history, both the K-series engines and the earlier Toyota ones, the really high revving screamers, both in naturally aspirated and supercharged form. They were great engines, and this latest generation, they're not quite as inspirational. I have to say that they run into their red lines a bit soon. They're perhaps not as zingy as those older engines, but it's not a bad engine. And I really like the idea of a naturally aspirated Sprint like this, because again it kind of makes sense of that kind of purist ethos. A lot of people moan about turbocharged engines in cars like the 4C and indeed the Alpine that's going to be coming onto the market soon. That weighs 1,100 kilos, by the way, so again quite a lot heavier than the Lotus. But here we have a naturally aspirated, lightweight, British-made sports car with a manual gearbox, which yet again is something that those rivals don't offer. Both the Alfa Romeo and the Alpine are DCT only, and this new, or the updated manual gearbox is, I think, the best I've ever driven in an Elise. It gets this new exposed gear linkage from the XCs, which is really cool. It's got the most positive shift I've yet experienced. It's got a nice short throw, a really positive engagement, which I tried to challenge given the transverse layout of the engine. So credit to them, they've really, I think, nailed it with this car. But where does all that weight saving come from? Well, on the standard car, before you add the Sprint pack, it's 10 kilos, and that mainly comes from bodywork. The new front end, the new clamshell, some more detailed bits around about the car, but overall 10 kilos, which is pretty impressive. The Sprint, the weight savings really are more noticeable. You get a lot of trick bits. You get a lithium-ion battery that saves 9 kilos on its own. You get carbon fibre seats, which save 6 kilos. You get super lightweight wheels, which are worth 5 kilos in themselves. Quite a lot of extra stuff, and that 41 kilo weight saving in total really is quite significant. £5,000 is quite a lot to pay when you consider that the basic 1.6 like this costs 32,300 stock. all of a sudden you're looking at a 37 grand car, and that's quite a lot more. But on these skinny tyres, it gives you enough to play with. And what you do get in an Elise, if not the kind of outright performance, you get that wonderful feedback and kind of tactility, horrible word, but there it is, from the non-assisted steering and the superb damping which is set up on these Norfolk B roads. It really works. It works out here on a track. Effectively, because the car's a bit lighter, effectively the spring rates are up a bit from before, so it's slightly stiffer, but it's still a comfortable car, and it's still one where you can throw the weight around with a lift. You know, you can start bringing the back end round. It's not a drift machine, it's not a car for doing massive skids, but there's enough playfulness in it and adjustability. There's no corruption in the controls at all. You might not be the fastest, but the chances are you'll be having quite a lot of fun, and I think that's quite an important argument in this day and age. Everyone's got very fixated with speed and horsepower and things like that. Lotus are bringing the argument back to less weight. It's the argument they've always made. If the Alpine and the 4C have got a wider audience thinking about lightweight cars, then they're obviously going to be thinking about Lotus as well, and I think that can only benefit them. You know, after all these years, the Elise quite possibly makes more sense than it ever has done. All this kind of dedication to making the car more focused and fun, I think it's working. The Elise is a package that just puts a smile on your face. It does decisively demonstrate that less really is more.